Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Dunns. Today we're studying Esther chapter 5. Let's get started.
Okay. Esther chapter number 5 picks up right after the events of Esther 4, where she's encouraged that she's got to go into the king and she's got to request some major help for her people. The king and Haman have gotten into an agreement that they're going to kill all of God's people. And since Esther has been hiding inside the palace and not telling people who she is or who she belongs to, she's now in a perfect position to try to help. Now, recapping the story for us today is my main man, Jebber. Jebber, what's this chapter about?
So Esther would die if went to the king, and she would die if the king didn't stick out his scepter. And the king stuck out his scepter, and she touched the end of it. She asked the king to come to the feast with her, but the bad guys were also there.
Sure.
And Esther's cousin was there, and the bad guys found Esther's cousin, and Esther's cousin made them mad. And so the bad guys wanted to hang him. And
That's the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great job. John, what was your takeaway from this story?
So my takeaway was how what's her name? Esther took such a big risk to save so many people that if the king didn't reach out her staff, she would have died. So, yeah.
Okay. Tell me about, because everything in this story and everything in the Bible pushes us to Jesus. Orville is very excited about today. What does this tell? What's this remind us about Jesus?
How Jesus sacrificed his life to save us.
That's true. That's true. When you read Esther chapter 5, a guy named Gary Smith said it like this. He's talking about Esther going into the throne room to talk to the king. Thank you, Orville. Let me hold you for a second. Gary Smith said it like this. He said, people who have hope to be used by God must boldly put themselves in a position where God can work through them rather than sitting back and being passive, hoping that God will use somebody else. And what he's saying is that we must use every moment of our lives that God gives us. So in the story, one of the words that keeps coming back in the story is the word favor. In the New Testament, we would use this as the word grace. And what it's talking about is how Joseph found favor when he was in Egypt. Esther is now finding favor. Orville is giving favor to all of us because he's excited today. But it's all talking about how God is working behind the scenes. The other side of this story to me is Haman. Like, what a ridiculous man. Have you ever known somebody, or have you ever been in a situation where you can feel like you got a ton of good stuff happening in your life, but if one bad thing happens, it just throws off your whole day? So this guy, or Haman, he really does have a lot of good things going on in his life, but he can't stand even for one person not to respect him. So this guy is, he's really bad. What Haman craved above all things was not just being important. He wanted to be seen as important. And when Mordecai didn't treat him as important, it threw his whole life off. So he even went on and he's describing all the good things, his promotion and his money. He even talked about how many kids he's got. But still, he said, none of it avails me. And what that means is, he says, none of that matters unless this one guy treats me with the respect I deserve. I want to just kind of remind us here that we ought to be very careful where we get our joy from. Our joy should not come from when everything goes right. It shouldn't be destroyed when one thing goes wrong. Our joy has to come from God. The other thing I want us to see is what does Esther invite the king and Haman to twice, guys? Do y'all remember?
A feast.
The feast.
A feast. And so she's inviting these guys to come eat with her. What I think is interesting is that Proverbs chapter 25, verse 21 says this: if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For so you will heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will reward you. Well, here's what we need to know. I think Esther knew this verse, Because who was her big enemy in the story? It was Haman, right? And so what did she invite him to do?
A feast.
To come eat and drink at her table. And then what did God do at the end? He took care of her. Listen, no matter when you're dealing with your enemies or your friends, none of us has the right to be mean. We all have to be godly. So we want to get our joy from God, and because our joy comes from God, we even then have the joy to be able to treat our enemies with respect. Now let's keep reading, and I want you to remember, God is working all throughout this passage. He is accomplishing big things. Even when you don't see Him, He's still at work. We hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.